Mayor Bill Saffo was in Washington, D.C. today for the National League of Cities to advocate for our community and bring areas of concern to leaders in Washington. Some of the items they discussed are working with our election delegation, transportation, and PFAS. This is something that has been affecting our community for a while now, especially when it comes to drinking water. Mayor Saffo says a national regulation for water and water quality here in the Cape Fear is very important to him.
We're advocating for more research and investment, but primarily the research to determine what do these PFAS do to our bodies, and hopefully will save thousands of people's lives.
Mayor Saffo said it's important to ask Congress for additional funding for the research needed for the Cape Fear region.